Edit.
Hey everyone, this is Eric Lindsay, professor of music, back with another video on the principles of music theory. Today we're focusing on rhythm and meter and its associated principle of musical pulse. So let's get started. First up, rhythm. Rhythm means the arrangements of sound and silence in time. Or, in short, when do I play this note and for how long do I hold it? Think of rhythm as the heartbeat of music. It gives music its energy and its propulsion. Let's listen to a basic rhythm. I'm going to have to beatbox this thing. Cha, 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 cha. The first thing you might notice is that there's a speed to the music, something that you might walk to or snap to. This is the pulse in the music. So pulse is a key concept here. Pulse is a steady series of equally spaced beats that establish the speed of a piece. And our rhythm is going to be dancing on top. Notice how some of the drum hits created a pattern around this pulse. Cha, 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 cha. I guess the last one was actually cha, cha, and then I'm going to do a repeat sign. Some of these hits are on the pulse. Some of these hits are occurring between pulses. The pulse in the arrangement of musical activity into strong and weak beats is what acts as a foundation for rhythmic patterning in music. In written music, rhythm is notated using different symbols for notes and rests. The length of each note and rest determines the rhythm. In the style of music that we're notating here, rhythm is notated by stems that we attach to note heads. A single stem with a closed note head is called a quarter note. A stem with an open note head is called a half note. And it's the duration of two quarters tied together. An open note head with no stem is called a whole note, and it's the duration of two half notes tied together, or the equivalent of 4 quarter notes. You'll also see notes with flags on them, either as a standalone flag, like this eighth note, or beamed together to create a pair of eighth notes. So let's go ahead and indicate that over here. An eighth note is half the duration of a quarter note. I'm going to go back and fill this in a little bit. And we're going to keep adding flags or beam to continue subdividing these notes. 2 flags indicate a 16th note, 3 a 32nd note, 4 a 64th note, and so on. And because rhythm involves the arrangements of sounds and silence in time, we should also acknowledge that music doesn't always involve a constant string of notes. There are also ways to indicate how long we don't play, and these are called rests. Each rest symbol indicates the number of pulses that we don't play a note. A whole rest, which looks like a little hole dug beneath the third line of the staff, is the same amount of time as a whole note, otherwise known as 4 pulses. A half rest, which is the same symbol, but flipped upwards like a hat, is the same as a half note, which is 2 pulses. We'll say whole, this is half. A quarter, which is this complicated shape, starting on the second line, coming to the rest there, and curving back around, is 1 pulse, and this is a quarter. An eighth rest is a half of a pulse. And then we can start to add little flags to make it a 16th, 32nd, 64th rest, just like we did with the other notes. These are all the same value equivalents as the notes. So if I go back up here to that rhythm we originally did, cha, cha, I would actually have it with pulse 1, 2, 3, 4. The fact that this one was halfway through, I make a little eighth rest, and then the same thing happened over here, eighth rest. Quarter, quarter, eighth quarter, 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 eighth, eighth, eighth quarter. So let's try it the other way, where I'll show you a rhythm. So, for instance, if we saw this rhythm, and we're told that the quarter note is getting the pulse, I'm going to say quarter note equals, let's say, 100. We're going to hold a note, first one, for 2 pulses, and then play the next sequence on the pulse. We'd see a half rest, wait for 2 pulses. We'd see a string of eighth notes paired together, all of which are the duration of a subdivided pulse, pulse, second half, pulse, and then a rest. So this rhythm sounds like, if this is our pulse, ta, 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 rest, rest, ta, 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 ta. The piece is in total 16 pulses to be played at a steady pace, and though some of the notes are longer or shorter, the pulse is going to remain constant throughout, even when we're resting. Musicians can have a hard time with this sometimes. Now, you might be noticing that all these names are fractions: eighth, quarter, half, whole, but a whole of what, or a half of what? And as it turns out, these are proportions of notes within a measure, or a bar, which we indicate in music using a vertical bar line, where the first pulse of the measure is considered the strongest of them all, is the foundation for what we call meter in music. Meter is the perception of larger patterns of rhythmic stress that are created by organizing pulses into regular measures, also known as bars. In other words, meter is referring to the way that beats are grouped in a piece of music, and how these groups are notated as measures or bars separated by these bar lines. A meter is indicated at the beginning of the piece using a time signature. A time signature looks like a fraction. The top number is going to tell you how many beats there are in a bar, and the bottom number is going to tell you what note value is getting the pulse. So, for example, in 4/4 time, there are 4 beats in the measure, and the value, when we see a 4, that means quarter note. So the duration of this measure will be the length of 4 quarter notes. It might not always be quarter notes that you're saying, just anything that adds up to 4. So it could be, for example, a half note in 2 quarter notes. It could be a quarter rest, quarter rest, quarter rest, quarter note. All these need to add up to 4. Looking at the piece that we played through originally, we have strong beats every 4 pulses. So this is 4, and this is as notated, the pulse is a quarter note. This is an example of 4/4. If we were to recompose the rhythm that we made earlier, but put it in 3/4 time, we would just drop the last one of these beats per bar, and it would look and sound something like this. It would be 3 pulses per bar. I'm just writing down the 3 pulses just so you can kind of see it. These pulse lines don't really appear in traditional notation. This is just a proto-notation approach to show you how many pulses we've got. So if we just did the same rhythm, this half rest would turn into a quarter rest because we only have 1 pulse left in the bar. I would drop this last set of 8s. And then we would have quarter, this little pairing of a rest, an 8th, and the last quarter. And it would sound something like this. Ta, 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 ta. So we get a little bit of a waltz-like feel. There are 2 terms that we use when talking about meter types: simple versus compound. Simple meters are those where each beat divides into multiples of 2. The example shown here, where every beat is dividing into 2 eighth notes, is an example of a simple meter. By contrast, if the beat divides equally into 3 notes, this is an example of compound meter. So in short, the terms simple and compound describe how we divide each pulse into 2 or 3 subdivisions. The other category we'll describe is how many pulses there are in a measure. And the terms that we'll use are duple, triple, and quadruple. If there are 2 pulses in a measure, that is a duple meter. If there are 3, it's a triple meter. So this example here with 3 is a triple. This example where there are 4 is a quadruple meter. So every meter description is going to include both the subdivision type, simple or compound, as well as the number of beats in the measure, duple, triple, or quadruple. So examples might be a simple duple meter, a simple triple meter, or a compound duple, or a compound triple. In simple meters, the time signature is going to map really closely onto these descriptions. The top number is going to indicate whether the meter is duple, triple, or quadruple, And the bottom number will tell us whether the music is written where the pulse is a quarter note, if 4 is the bottom number, a half note, where 2 is the bottom number, or an eighth note, when 8 is the bottom number, and so on. 2/4 is a simple duple meter where each beat subdivides into eighth notes. 3/2 is a simple triple meter where each beat subdivides into quarter notes. 4/8 is a simple quadruple where each beat subdivides into sixteenths. From listening to a piece, we don't know if the meter is written in 4/4 or 4/8 or 4/2. What metric value gets the pulse is up to the composer or the arranger. That's just a notational choice. But we can tell if the meter is simple, 1 and 2 and 1 and 2, or compound, or 1 and a 2 and a 1 and a 2 and a 1 and a 2. We can also tell if it's duple and quadruple or triple. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 versus 1, 2, 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, 4. It'll be slightly different in compound meters, where the pulse will always be a dotted note value. Dots extend the duration of a note by an extra half of that value, making it 150% of the undotted value. So a dotted quarter note is the duration of 3 eighth notes, not just 2. Because we don't have a clean number equivalent to indicate dotted values in a time signature, the compound signature will have the subdivided note length at the bottom, and the total number of those subdivisions within the bar at the top. So you'll need to do some quick division. 6/8 is not a simple sextuple meter. It is a compound duple meter. The 8 on the bottom refers to which note value indicates how the pulse is subdivided. The top number shows you how many of them there are in the bar. So 2 groups of 3 eighth notes, or the duration of 2 dotted quarters, is going to indicate a compound duple meter. Let's take a look at how musicians read meter and factor this into how they perform a piece of music. So when musicians see a piece of music and we're trying to figure out rhythm and meter and where to put these notes in the right time, there's a couple of factors that we look at. So the first one is going to be our time signature. And this is an interesting case of C written here instead of numbers. We would expect there to be a fraction where the number says number of beats, and then the bottom note says what note value is getting the beat in this piece. Common time is the same as 4/4, meaning that there's 4 beats in the bar, and the bottom note is a quarter note. A quarter note is going to be getting the pulse. So I'm going to see in this measure that between here and the first bar line, there's going to be 4 beats. And we already said that there's the equivalent of a quarter note is getting the pulse. I'm going to kind of mark out here where the pulses fall. So this first one, there are 4 16th notes in a quarter note, 4 16ths in a quarter note, 2 eighths or 4 16ths in a quarter note, and 2 eighths and 4 16ths in a quarter note. So the first measure is going to involve 2 sets of 16th notes and then 2 sets of quarter notes. The next thing that's going to be interesting to us is going to be the speed in which we're moving. This is allegro. And sometimes you'll see a piece of music that says quarter note equals, because the value is going to be getting the pulse as a quarter note. So it'll say quarter note is a certain beat per minute, or BPM. And we would use a metronome to tell us what is that speed if we don't have it like instinctually built in to know exactly what the speed is. Allegro is one of the many examples of having a descriptive word that might be in English or might be in Italian or whatever is the language of the composer. That's going to tell us the speed in which we're playing. And allegro is one way of saying fast in English. And it kind of equates to quarter note equals 120 to 168, I suppose could be something that's around the allegro. So if I'm using a metronome, this metronome is going to hold time. I'm going to say metronome on. This beat number is telling me how many beats in the bar. And we already said that there's 4 in this measure. And then the tempo we said is going to be around, let's keep it on the moderate part of allegro, we'll say 132. This is the tempo. So these are quarter notes. Ta 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 di ta di ta di ta di takadimi 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 ta. So at this speed would be like this. To give you a sense of what this tempo and what these rhythmic subdivisions and what that meter is telling us. Now, quarter notes are not the only thing that gets a pulse around here. Sometimes we come across a piece where we have this symbol, this is the C, like our comment time before, that now with a slash through it. And that's meaning the equivalent to 2-2, where the half note gets the pulse. And allegro moderato is like allegro, where fast is 120 to 168. Moderato is moderate from like 108 to 120 beats a minute. Let's go ahead and kind of split the difference. Let's say that we're kind of around the 116 or so. So another thing you might notice is that, the first time through, we want to see that there's the right number of beats in the bar. And we already said that there's 2 half notes, and the half notes get the pulse. So if you're counting the measures as 1, 2, 1, 2, we're kind of, each one of these is half of a bar is the equivalent of a pulse. Pulse, 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 and so on. Now, one thing that's kind of weird, right, is that we only have 2 quarter notes. This is not a full bar. Quarter, 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 quarter. This should add up to 4 quarter notes or 2 half notes. This is only 1 half note worth of notes. So is this a printing error? No, this is a pickup, right? So you could say this is like an anacrusis or a pickup to the thing, meaning that the piece is going to begin with some sort of gesture that starts us off. The happy birthday song starts off with an anacrusis or a pickup. Happy birthday to you. The happy is the part of the pickup, and then the first downbeat is actually birthday. What you'll often find is that pieces with a pickup will have this same number of beats taken out of the last bar, or at least the remaining quality, the remaining number of beats that we're missing here will then be the first half of the bar shown here. Notice that we get all the way through half note, half note, half note, half note, and here is 1 half note here, which means that bottom line, if we're counting this whole thing out, 1, 2, 1, 2, or actually 1, 2, 1. 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. So this equates to the second half of a bar. They'll be missing some of it by the time we get to the very end of the piece. And if you look at the very end of the piece, sure enough, we're missing it from the very end of the piece as well. It's just that gesture is always going to involve those pickups. So how does this sound, right? So if we were to use our metronome and tell us what is the beats, we're going to say 2 beats a bar. We're going to say this is down at 116. This is a half note. So these quarter notes are not 1, 2, 1, 2, but actually subdividing those half notes. Bum, 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 bum. So it sounds like this. Like that. Both of these cases are, as we recall, simple meters, right? Simple meter does not mean easy or not complex. Simple just means simple equates to each pulse is divided into 2s. Now we might have examples of another piece where we have 2 beats in the bar, but we have a compound time. So in this fine example, this is an example of a duple meter, meaning that there are 2 beats in the bar, but each one of these beats is not divided equally in half. It's going to be divided into 3s. So each one of these notes, as notated in this meter, is going to be, the value is a dotted quarter gets a pulse, and each one of these subdivisions is an 8th note. So instead of thinking there's 6 pulses in this bar, there's actually 2 pulses in 6/8 at a regular tempo, where the pulse is going to be dotted quarter, dotted quarter, dotted quarter, dotted quarter, and these 8th notes here, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, are moving at that speed. Andante grazioso. Andante means walking pace, and it means the pulse is going to equal about 76 to 100. So I'm going to say the dotted quarter, because we said that of these 6 8th notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they're being grouped into 2 pulses of dotted quarters. So dotted quarter is going to equal something along the lines of, let's say, 100. Let's get it fast for this piece. I put this in 88. Still a bit fast, but whatever. Sorry, Mozart. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, and a 2, and a 1. So it goes like this. So in sum, rhythm, meter, and tempo are the building blocks of how music moves in time. Rhythm concerns the arrangements of sounds and silence in time. Meter is the perception of larger patterns of rhythmic stress that's created by organizing pulses into measures or bars. The terms are interchangeable. And tempo, indicated by BPM or beats per minute in descriptive terms like allegro or adagio or fast or slow, concerns the speed of a pulse within a piece. These concepts are going to work together to create the structure and feel of a piece. How about you try to apply this for yourself? I'll set up the bottom number of a time signature. I'll put a 4 here. And I'll play for you a rhythm. Try and figure out how we'd notate a piece that sounds like this. Your first objective is just to hear the pulses and find out how many there are in total. So if this is the tune, ta, 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 ta. Try and figure out how many pulses we had. The pulse, I'm feeling it like this. 1, 2, That's the speed the piece is moving. So if the piece is going like this, let's count how many pulses there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, 10, 11, 12. So 12 pulses total. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Our next challenge is going to try and figure out how do we group these. Does this imply a duple, triple, or quadruple meter? Does it feel like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, which would imply a triple meter, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's just try listening to it again. Ta, 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 ta. I'm hearing this as the strongest of these pulses are the first of every 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Thus making it an example of a triple meter of some kind. Next, let's try and recall, do any of these beats subdivide? And if they do subdivide, do they divide into 2s or 3s? So ta, 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 ta. This spot here, where they're dividing, this appears to be dividing equally in halves. This is an example of a simple triple meter. Then our last challenge is to remember some of these are shorter, some of these are longer, and some of these are the duration of a single pulse. So if the tune goes ta, 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 I would notice the first one is the length of 2 pulses. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, rest. 1 and 2 and 3, 1, rest, rest. So if we know that there are 3 beats in the bar, and the duration of the bottom indicates a quarter note is our pulse, and the first note is held out for 2 pulses, that is a half note, and the pulse is a quarter note. We have pulses here, but not on this last beat. I put a quarter rest. These are eighth notes. We have a pulse on the last beat, a pulse on the downbeat, and then we rest 2 more times. That is the rhythm that we played. If you have any questions about this, go back and revisit the concepts from the start of the video, especially tracking how many pulses each note or rest value receives. In our next video, we'll return to the concept of pitch and investigate some of the rules that govern the arrangement of pitches into a hierarchy in total music. I look forward to seeing you there.